Welcome to Echo Forge, dark fantasy and sci-fi stories from the edges of forgotten worlds. If you enjoy this kind of storytelling, hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next vision. Now, let's step through the gate. It begins in the same place every time. Cold flagstone. A circle of carved runes sunk into the floor like old teeth. A recess in the ceiling where darkness gathers and refuses to fall. In the center of the circle stands armor. Not a man in armor, just armor. A helm with a narrow visor, a gorget, breastplate, backplate, pauldrons like blunt wings, greaves and sabatons heavy enough to crack stone, gauntlets jointed in blackened steel, every piece locked to the next by pins and straps that have no hands to fasten them, because there are no hands, no wrists, no arms beneath, no ribs pressing against the inside, no breath fogging the grill. There is only emptiness inside the plates, and something in that emptiness that is not air. A presence held together by the same force that holds the armor upright. A note rings through the metal, silent to the dungeon, deafening to the thing inside. The chime is not heard. It is felt. It goes through every rivet, every seam, every scratch in the steel, and it pulls the armor into readiness like a marionette yanked by a single string. The helm lifts. The guardian stands. At first, there is no thought attached to it, no question, no memory. Only a command that is older than the rust in the cracks. Guard. The word is not spoken. It exists as pressure, as certainty, an invisible hand against the inside of the breastplate, forcing the posture straight, forcing the feet into a stance that has been repeated so many times the stone remembers it. The dungeon is quiet. Not peaceful, never that, but quiet in the way a blade is quiet in its sheath. Somewhere beyond the chamber, water drips in patient intervals. Somewhere deeper, something scrapes. Somewhere nearer, a torch sputters, then steadies. And then the air changes. Footfalls. Not the soft, constant sounds of this place, settling stone, crawling things, distant chains swaying in drafts. These are irregular, living, hesitant, then bold. One pair, then another. A pause, a whisper. The guardian turns toward the corridor mouth. He does not have eyes. The visor is empty, but he can sense. The dungeon sends information through him the way a drum sends a beat through the palm. Vibrations in the floor, heat in the air, the faint tang of oil and sweat that clings to bodies, the sharp, clean scent of whetstone on steel. Warmth approaches. Warmth is intrusion. Intrusion is threat. Threat is to be removed. The guardian steps forward. His sabatons strike the flagstone with a dull, absolute weight. The sound rolls down the corridor like a verdict. The armor moves as if it has muscles and tendons. But there is nothing flexing beneath. Only spell work. Only binding. Only the dungeon's will threaded through plates and joints. He reaches the corridor mouth and stops. Torchlight spills across his breastplate, revealing old scars, deep gouges that have been hammered flat, cracks that have been fused shut with dark metal, pockmarks like bites. Runes etched along the edges of the plates catch the light and drink it down. 4 figures stand at the far end of the hall. A shield bearer with a crest painted in fading blue, a spear, a bow held half drawn, a robed one with a staff topped by a pale stone. They see him and stop. For a heartbeat, the air hangs, thin and tense. Then words fly down the corridor. The guardian cannot understand them. They are just sounds, shapes in air, But tone carries meaning even when language does not. Fear forced into courage, command shaped into bravery. They spread out. They've done this before. Not these ones. New voices, new heartbeats. But the pattern is old. A dance the dungeon has taught many times. The spear advances first, tip low, testing. The shield follows, raised. The bow shifts left, seeking an angle. The robed one stays back, staff tapping once on stone, tap. And the air tightens like a held breath. The guardian's gauntlet opens, closes. He does not draw a weapon because he has none. He does not need one. The armour itself is the weapon. The weight, the force, the certainty of the command. The spear lunges. The point scrapes across the guardian's breastplate, skitters off a rune, sparks snapping bright in the dim. The impact shudders through the steel and into the emptiness inside. A shockwave that feels like pain without nerves. Like a bell struck too hard. Pain is information. Information is irrelevant. The guardian steps in and grabs the spear shaft with his gauntlet. The spear bearer jerks back, surprised at the strength. The guardian does not yield. He yanks the weapon forward, dragging the man off balance, then drives his other gauntlet into the man's chest. Bone cracks, breath bursts, warmth splashes the air. The guardian feels it as heat against his plates. The man falls. The shield bearer roars, another sound shape, and charges, shield first. Wood and metal slam into the guardian's torso. The force is enough to shove him back a step. The impact rings through him, rattling the joints. The guardian answers with brute simplicity. He wraps both gauntlets around the shield's rim and twists. Straps snap. The shield bearer staggers, suddenly naked without his barrier. The guardian drives a sabaton into the man's knee. There's a wet crunch. The man collapses, screaming. The bowstring twangs. An arrow punches into the guardian's shoulder, bites into a seam, lodges deep. The guardian feels the intrusion like a thorn driven into a thought. He turns toward the archer. The archer's eyes widen. The guardian crosses the distance in 3 heavy strides. The archer fumbles for another arrow, hands suddenly clumsy. The guardian's gauntlet closes around the archer's throat. Warm flesh compresses. The guardian feels the heat and the pulse as vibration against steel. He squeezes until the vibration stops. The robed one raises the staff. The pale stone at its tip flares. Light hits the guardian like a thrown net. Thin lines of brightness that wrap the armour, crawl into seams, seek the runes. For the first time, the guardian hesitates. Not because he chooses to, because the spell touches the binding. The lines of light yank at the emptiness inside the armour, tugging at the presence like hooks. The guardian's joints lock. His posture stutters. The command guard tightens, then warps, then strains under pressure. The robed one speaks again, louder, sharper. The pale stone pulses. The guardian takes a step, and the spell bites harder. Pain blooms, sudden and vast. Not the shock of impact, not the vibration of a blow. Something deeper, closer to the presence itself, like fingers digging into the knot that holds him together, trying to undo it. The guardian lurches forward anyway. He lifts his gauntlet, aiming for the staff. The robed one slams the staff down. The runes beneath the guardian's feet flare. The circle, the circle. It answers that impact like a drum struck at the right note. A crackle races through the flagstone, up into the guardian's sabatons, into the plates, into the seams. For a split second, the guardian is everywhere at once. Every rivet aware of every other rivet. Every scratch screaming a note. Then the binding snaps. The armour comes apart. Not gently, not like a man falling, like a thrown suit of plates exploding outward as the force that held it upright is cut. The helm spins away, clanging off a pillar. A pauldron tears free and skids across stone. The breastplate flips, rings, slams down. Gauntlets tumble like severed hands. The emptiness inside is yanked apart with the pieces. For a moment, only a moment, the Guardian is still aware, stretched thin across scattered metal. That is the worst part. To be pulled into fragments and still feel. The present screams without lungs. And then, nothing. It begins in the same place every time. Cold flagstone, the circle of runes, the recess in the ceiling where darkness gathers. Pieces of armour lie scattered around the chamber, as if someone threw them there. Then the chime rings through the metal. Again. The scattered plates shudder. They drag themselves across the floor with a scraping chorus. Greaves pull toward sabatons. Pauldrons lift and rotate like beetles righting themselves. The helm rolls, stops, then slides backward against the pull. The pieces slam together. Pins align, straps knit. Metal fuses without heat. Runes flare and stitch the seam shut. Inside, the emptiness knits too. A presence hauled back into coherence, whether it wants it or not. The Guardian stands. No breath, but a sensation like inhaling ice. No heartbeat, but a pressure that steadies like a drumbeat finding tempo. No thought, only command guard. The corridor waits. The dungeon breathes. Footfalls will come. They always do. The next time, it is different only in details. The intruders are 2 instead of 4. One carries a curved blade that sings as it cuts air. The other is small, quick, its footsteps light, almost respectful. They do not shout. They do not spread out. They rush together, like they've learned the Guardian's weight is best overcome with speed. The curved blade strikes first, biting into the Guardian's elbow joint. Sparks snap. The blade wedges, twists. Pain pulses, impact, vibration, intrusion. Then fades into the background under the command. The small one darts in low and slams something into the Guardian's shin. A clay flask. It shatters, splashing oil that stinks sharp and bitter. A flint sparks. Fire blooms up the Guardian's leg. Heat crawls along the plates, licking into seams. The Guardian does not have flesh to burn, but the heat reaches the runes. The runes do not like heat. They flare, then flicker. The binding tightens in response, as if clenching against injury. The Guardian steps forward, on fire, and swings a gauntlet. The small one dodges. The blade wielder smiles, thin, confident, and yanks hard on the embedded blade, trying to wrench the joint apart. The Guardian feels the joint strain, feels pins grind, feels metal protest. He grabs the curved blade with his free gauntlet. The blade's owner tenses, expecting to pull free. The Guardian pulls instead. The man is yanked forward, chest first, into the Guardian's burning leg. The man's scream is immediate, living pain, human pain far louder than the Guardian's silent agony. The Guardian drives his helm into the man's face. The helm is empty. The impact still breaks bone. The man collapses. The small one retreats, scrambling backward, eyes wide. The Guardian steps toward it. Fire still burns. Oil still smokes. The small one throws something else. Powder in a pinch, tossed into the air. It hits the fire. The flame explodes. For a second, the corridor is a furnace. Heat slams into the Guardian like a wall. The runes on his plates flash too bright. The binding tries to compensate. It fails. The Guardian's greaves warp. Straps crisp. Pins pop. The armor splits at the seams like a cracked shell. Pieces fall away in heavy clatters. The helm drops, face first, rolling into darkness. The Guardian's awareness stretches with it, dragged down into fragments. Pain is not heat. Pain is the unmaking. The presence unravels, torn across steel shards, dragged thin like thread. And then, nothing. The chime. The scrape of metal dragging itself back to the circle. The snap of plates fusing. The cold rush of being assembled again. The Guardian stands. He does not remember the faces. He does not remember the screams. He does not remember the fire. But something remains, not a memory, a faintness, a pressure in the emptiness, like a dent that didn't fully hammer out, a suspicion that death is not an ending. But the command swallows it whole. Guard. This is the dungeon's rhythm: intrusion, impact, unmaking, reassembly, again, again, again. Time is not measured in hours here, because there is no sun, no sky, no seasons. Time is measured in footsteps that aren't his, in torches that hiss, in steel that scrapes against his plates. Sometimes it is a single intruder, brave or foolish or desperate enough to come alone. Sometimes it is a group, practiced, cautious, speaking softly as they plan. Sometimes they die quickly. Sometimes they make him work for it. The dungeon does not care which. The dungeon only cares that the Guardian stands where he must stand, and that anything that comes through that corridor does not pass. The Guardian does not care either. Not yet. Not at first. Because he is not someone. He is a function. A door that punches back. A lock that kills. A rule given shape. And rules do not ask why. One day, if day can be used for a stretch of loops that feel slightly longer than the others, intruders come who smell different. Not sweat and oil. Something sharp and clean and wrong. They carry no torches. The corridor ahead of them glows with a faint green light that clings to the walls, as if the stone itself has been painted with sickness. There are 3. They move quietly, but not from fear, from certainty. They do not speak. They stop in the hall when they see him. They do not flinch. They simply wait. The Guardian steps forward. They do not spread out. They do not rush. They do something else. The one in the middle lifts a hand. In its palm is a small object, round, dull, wrapped in wire. It flicks the object down the corridor. It rolls, clinking softly, until it stops at the Guardian's feet. The Guardian pauses, not because he chooses to, but because the object is unfamiliar, and the binding hesitates on unfamiliarity only long enough to confirm it is intrusion. He lifts a sabaton to crush it. The object clicks. A thin line of blue-white light snaps out from it, lashing into the runes on his feet. The circle beneath him answers with a sharp answering flare. And then the light hooks. It does not burn. It does not cut. It reaches into the emptiness. The Guardian's posture locks. His gauntlets twitch, opening and closing like a man trying to fight a seizure. The other 2 intruders move at last, stepping in with long metal hooks on poles, aiming not for joints, not for weak points, aiming for the etched runes along the armor's edges. They jab the hooks into those runes and twist. Pain floods him so fast the command stutters. Not impact pain, not heat, not tearing. This is interference. This is someone grabbing the knot of his being and yanking it sideways. For the first time in all the loops, however many there have been, there is something inside the Guardian that strains against the command hard enough to create a sensation like thought. A flicker, a spark, a single, impossible shaped number. It is not a word he knows. It is not a sentence. It is not even language. It is resistance. The Guardian tries to move. The binding holds him still. The hooks twist. The runes on his plates flare, then dim, like eyes blinking against bright light. The object at his feet clicks again. The light tightens. The emptiness inside him compresses, squeezed like breath in a fist. The Guardian's helm tilts, slowly, as if looking down at the object. He cannot see it, but he can feel it. A point of pressure, a cold needle against the inside of his stance. The intruders lean in, their movements careful now, reverent in a way that makes the dungeon feel colder. One reaches out and presses a gloved hand flat against the Guardian's breastplate. The glove is marked with symbols. The Guardian does not understand symbols, but something in him recognizes pattern. The symbols are like the runes that stitch him together. The gloved hand traces along an etched line. The Guardian feels the touch like vibration through metal. The intruder presses harder. The edged line flares. And then the intruder speaks. A low sound, not quite a chant, not quite a command. The dungeon itself seems to listen. The Guardian's binding shudders. The command guard tightens, then slips, like a chain sliding off a hook. For a heartbeat, the Guardian is not pulled forward by the command. He is simply standing, held together by something else, held together by himself. The sensation is so strange it is almost pain. The intruder's chant changes. The chain snaps back into place. Guard slams into him like a gate closing. The Guardian lurches, too late. The hooks twist one final time. The armor's seams rupture, not by force, but by unthreading. The presence inside him is pulled out through the cracks in a way that makes no physical sense, like smoke yanked through a needle's eye. This death is not impact. This death is violation. The Guardian's awareness screams across every plate at once as the binding is peeled apart. He collapses, not as a man collapsing, but as a pile of armor losing the permission to be upright. Metal slams against stone. The intruders step back and watch. The green glow in their hands brightens. The object at the Guardian's feet cools, then goes dark. The three intruders do not rush forward to loot or gloat. They simply turn and leave, footsteps quiet, confident, unhurried. As the last footfall fades, the Guardian's scattered plates lie still. The emptiness inside them thins. The presence drifts toward nothing. And in that drifting, in that fading, in that last stretch before the chime, a question forms. It is not words. It is not clear. It is only a shape in the darkness. Why? Then nothing. The chime rings. The plates shudder. They drag themselves back to the circle. They slam together. The binding stitches tight. The Guardian stands, guard. But the dent remains. That faintness, that pressure, that shape in the emptiness that refuses to smooth out. Not memory, because memory requires a mind, and a mind requires identity, and identity is not part of the dungeon's design. And yet, something has begun to accumulate in the cracks. The loops continue, but they begin to feel different, not in the way the dungeon changes. The dungeon is constant. Stone is stone. Darkness is darkness. The corridor is always the corridor. The difference is inside the armor, a fraction of a heartbeat before the command takes full hold. There is a moment, a tiny, stolen pause, where the Guardian is simply aware of cold, aware of weight, aware of the circle beneath his feet, aware of the chime as something that happens to him, not just something that happens. The first time it happens, it is so brief it could be nothing. The second time, it is longer. The third time, it includes a flicker of recognition. This is the same place. This is the same beginning. This has happened before. The command slams down immediately after, crushing the thought flat. Guard. And yet the thought left an imprint, like a boot print in ash. Intruders arrive. A pair of mercenaries laughing too loudly, confident in their armour and their numbers. The Guardian kills them. Their blood warms his plates. Their bodies slump in the corridor. The dungeon's drafts carry the smell away. The Guardian dies later to a mage's lightning. White, hot pain across runes, seams rupturing, plates flung apart. He reassembles. The chime rings. The moment of awareness comes, and this time it brings the faintest echo of the mercenaries' laughter, just tone, just cadence. Not understanding, but recognition. The Guardian tilts his helm a fraction, as if listening to the air where that laughter once was. Then the command tightens. He turns to the corridor mouth. Footfalls approach. Another loop. A lone adventurer, limping, bleeding, torch held low. The Guardian steps forward as always. The adventurer sees him and whispers a word. The word is thin, shaking, but it repeats. The adventurer says it again, like a prayer or a curse. The Guardian does not understand it, but he hears the shape. Hollow. Again, hollow. Again, hollow. The adventurer raises a blade with two hands and charges, screaming. The Guardian catches the blade in his gauntlet. Steel bites into steel. The adventurer wrenches, desperate, trying to pull free. The Guardian pulls the adventurer in and slams a knee, an empty greave, into the adventurer's gut. The adventurer folds. The word hollow comes out as a cough. The Guardian drives the adventurer down, ends it. He feels the adventurer's warmth fade as the body cools. The command remains satisfied. Later in that same loop, a trap in the dungeon triggers. An old pressure plate the Guardian has walked over 1,000 times without consequence, because the dungeon has no need to harm its own tool. But the intruder's blood slicked the stone. The Guardian's sabaton slips half an inch. That is enough. The pressure plate depresses. A volley of iron spikes shoots from the walls, aimed at chest height. The Guardian turns, too heavy to evade. Spikes slam into him, punching into seams, pinning plates to stone. The impact rings. Then the runes scream. Pinned like that, the binding strains stretch between immovable points. The emptiness inside him compresses. The pain is not from spikes piercing flesh. There is no flesh. It is from being held, from the binding being forced into a shape it was not meant to take. He tries to pull free. The spikes hold. The runes flare brighter, trying to compensate. Something gives, not the spikes, the binding. It snaps, and the armour falls apart in pinned fragments, pieces slamming down with harsh clangs, awareness tearing across steel until it fades. Death, nothing. Rebirth, chime, circle. The Guardian stands, for a tiny stolen moment before guard crushes down. Hollow. The sound shape returns, not meaning, not language, but a label. A thing that was applied to him, a thing that might be true. The Guardian's gauntlet flexes. The command tightens. Guard. He moves toward the corridor mouth. But something has changed. He is not only reacting anymore. He is noticing. He begins to notice the circle, not as just a place where he stands at the beginning, but as an object. The runes are carved deep. They are older than the scars on his plates. They flare during reassembly. They hum in the seconds after the chime, like a lingering vibration. He does not have eyes, but he senses the runes the way he senses heat. by the way they push on the binding, by the way they tug at the emptiness inside him. Sometimes, when there are no footfalls yet, he shifts his weight a fraction. The runes respond barely, but they respond. A soft tightening, like a leash sensed and corrected. He shifts again, testing the boundary of what the command will allow in the absence of intruders. The command does not forbid movement. It only demands that he guard. So he steps off the circle. The first time he does it, the dungeon seems to hold its breath. The guardian takes one heavy step onto cold flagstone beyond the runes. Nothing happens. No punishment. No lightning. No collapse. He takes another step. A faint tug pulls at the binding, an invisible thread stretching back to the circle. He can feel it. He pauses. The tug remains steady, patient, like something waiting for him to come back to center. He turns and steps back onto the circle. The tug relaxes. He stands, and in the emptiness inside the armor, a new shape forms, a connection, a tether, not understood, but felt. He is allowed to move within limits. He's allowed to leave the circle. But the circle is an anchor, an origin, a leash point. That matters. He does not know why it matters, but he knows it matters. Intruders arrive again. A heavy group this time, 5, maybe 6. Their footsteps are disciplined. Their torches are shielded. They speak in short bursts. The guardian meets them in the corridor. They bring nets. Not rope nets, metal nets, weighted and barbed, etched with faint symbols. They throw them in practiced arcs. The net slams into the guardian's torso and arms, the weighted edges wrapping around his plates. The symbols on the net flare faintly as they touch his runes. The binding tightens. Pain spikes, immediate and sharp. The guardian staggers. The group surges forward with hooked poles trying to pull him down. The guardian braces and hauls back. For a moment, it is pure force. Living muscle against dead weight and spell work. Then one of them, small, quick, slips close and jams a chisel into the seam beneath the guardian's arm. The chisel is etched too. It bites into the rune line like a tooth into a nerve. Pain roars. The guardian's stance wavers. A hooked pole catches his knee and yanks. He falls. Armor slams to stone heavy and final. The net tightens. The symbols brighten. The group piles on, not striking randomly, but targeting seams, joints, runes. They are not just trying to kill him. They are trying to take him apart. And when they succeed, when the binding begins to unthread and the armor comes apart under their hands, the guardian's awareness stretches across the net as well, caught in its symbols. For a heartbeat, he feels outside himself, feels the net's cold logic, its purpose, its design. It is like touching another mind made of metal and command. It is like realizing he is not the only thing that can be built to obey. And in that realization, something inside him clenches around that earlier shape. Why? The question does not stop his death. The armor still collapses into pieces. The present still tears. The dungeon still swallows the moment. But when the chime rings again, when the pieces drag themselves back, when the binding stitches, when he stands, the question returns faster, not clear, not verbal, but there, a splinter in the emptiness that won't dissolve. The guardian begins to associate the chime with return. He begins to anticipate it. Not consciously at first, more like the way a blade expects impact when swung hard enough. Each death now has 2 parts, the unmaking and the waiting. In the last stretched moments of fading awareness, when plates are scattered, when the binding is fraying, He begins to listen for the chime that will not come until after nothing. He cannot count time, but he feels the gap. He feels the absence. He begins to hate it. Hate is too strong a word for something that barely has thought. But the pressure inside the emptiness becomes sharper, less passive. When the chime comes, it is not only command, it is reminder, it is chain, it is the sound of being dragged back. He still stands, he still guards. But the chime is no longer neutral. It is an enemy wearing the mask of purpose. After countless loops, after deaths by blade, by fire, by spell, by trap, by corrosion, by crushing stone, something happens that should not matter. An intruder runs, not away from him, past him. It is a small figure, fast and terrified, torch thrown aside, breath ragged. It darts between the Guardian's heavy steps, slipping close enough that the Guardian feels its heat in a sudden rush. The command is immediate remove. The Guardian pivots to strike, gauntlet swinging like a hammer. But the figure is already past his reach, sprinting down the corridor behind him, toward the door he guards. The Guardian turns fully. The door is not a wooden thing, not a barred gate. It is stone carved into a single slab, etched with the same runes as the circle, set into the wall so perfectly there is no seam. The door has never opened. The Guardian has never questioned the door. It exists, therefore it must be guarded. The fleeing intruder slams into the door, palms flat, searching for a latch that is not there. It sobs, sound breaking against stone. The Guardian advances, heavy and inevitable. The intruder looks back, eyes wild, face streaked with grime. It screams words. The Guardian does not understand them, but in the scream there is something familiar. A repeated sound shape. Hollow, hollow. The Guardian's gauntlet rises. The intruder flinches, raising an arm to shield its head. The Guardian's gauntlet pauses. A fraction of a second. A stolen moment between command and action. In that moment, the Guardian becomes aware of the door in a way he never has. Not just as an object to guard, as an obstacle, as a boundary, as something the intruder wanted, desperately, and could not have. The Guardian feels the intruder's heat, the frantic vibration of its heartbeat against the stone through the floor. And inside the armour, the question sharpens. Why this door? The command shoves hard. Remove. The Guardian's gauntlet comes down. The intruder crumples. Warmth spills. The door remains closed. The dungeon remains quiet. And the Guardian stands over the dead, gauntlet still lowered, feeling something he has never felt before. Not satisfaction, not completion, a wrongness. A sense that something just happened that was about him in a way guarding is not. He does not understand the door, but he understands that the door is connected to the question. The question survives the loop. It follows him into death. He dies soon after, because the dungeon does not allow long contemplation. A group arrives, prepared, and takes him apart with patience. The net bites. The symbols flare. The runes scream. The Guardian's awareness stretches, tears, fades. Nothing. The chime rings. The armour reassembles. The Guardian stands in the circle. Guard. But the door is there, even unseen. The tether to it exists like tension in the command. He steps off the circle again. One step, two. The tether pulls faintly. He turns toward where the door must be. He begins to walk. The command does not forbid it. It only insists on guarding. He walks down the corridor toward the door he has always guarded from the other side, feeling the tug tighten the farther he gets from the circle. When he reaches the door, the tug is strong enough that his plates hum with it. He stands close. The runes etched into the door press against the runes etched into him, like magnets repelling and attracting at once. Pain flickers, not death pain, but pressure pain, like two rules colliding. He lifts a gauntlet and places it against the door. Stone is cold. The runes beneath his palm flare faintly in response. For a heartbeat, something inside him aligns with something inside the door. A resonance, a near remembering, a sensation like being on the edge of speech. Then the command clenches. Guard, not here, not now. The tether yanks. The guardian stumbles backward a step. The runes dim. The door returns to being only a door. He stands there in the corridor, facing the sealed slab, feeling the question in him press harder than it ever has. Why am I here? No answer comes. Only footsteps far away, approaching. Intruders. The dungeon's rhythm reasserts itself. The guardian turns from the door to the corridor mouth. He takes his stance. He lifts his empty helm. And for the first time, the motion feels like a choice he is being forced to make. The footfalls draw nearer. Torchlight blooms. Voices echo. One voice says a word he has heard before, hollow, and another answers with a different word, one that repeats like a label the way hollow does. Guardian. Guardian. The guardian does not understand, but he recognizes that they are naming him, and something inside the emptiness tightens around the idea of a name, a self, a thing that can be addressed, a thing that can be questioned. The intruders appear at the far end of the corridor. Steel flashes, magic hums. The guardian steps forward. The loop continues. But the loop is no longer clean. There is grit in its gears now. There is a crack in the perfect mindlessness. There is pain that has become more than sensation. Pain has become memory, and memory has become the beginning of thought. As the first blade strikes his breastplate and sparks fly, as the impact rings through him and the command clamps down, the guardian feels the question rise up again, wordless, furious, unavoidable. Not why them, not why this dungeon. The first true question of something that is starting to become a someone, why me? And the dungeon, as always, offers only one answer: death, rebirth, again. It begins in the same place every time. Cold flagstone, the circle of runes sunk into the floor like old teeth, the recess in the ceiling where darkness gathers and refuses to fall. Armour stands in the center. Not a man in armour, just armour. A hollow helm with a narrow visor. Plates locked to plates by pins and straps that have no hands to tighten them. Gauntlets jointed in blackened steel. Greaves heavy enough to bruise stone. Runes etched along edges and seams. Thin, precise lines that glow faintly when the chime rings, then dim to a patient ember. Inside the plates, emptiness held together by force. A presence shaped by binding. The chime hits, not sound in air, sound in metal. A note that runs through every rivet and scar and pulls the armor upright like a puppet yanked by a single string. The guardian stands. The command clamps down as it always has. Guard. And then, because the crack exists now, there is a moment before the command fully takes him. A tiny pause where he is simply there, not acting, not reacting, existing. The pause is not granted. It is stolen, pried out of the space between chime and obedience by 1,000 deaths that refuse to stay clean. In that pause, the door returns to him, sealed stone, rune-etched slab, always closed. The circle returns, anchor, leash point, origin. And the question returns like a splinter under a plate, why me? Then the command hardens. The pause collapses. He turns toward the corridor mouth. Footfalls will come. They always do. For a long stretch of loops, nothing changes in the dungeon itself. Stone remains stone. Darkness remains darkness. The corridor remains a long, ribbed throat leading from the guardian's chamber to wherever the living enter. But something changes in him. It is not dramatic at first, not a sudden awakening with clarity and words. It is a slow shift in the weight of each moment. He begins to notice the instant before violence, the half-breath of hesitation when intruders see him and decide whether to charge, the slight lift in air pressure before a spell is cast, the way a torch flame leans when someone moves too fast past it. He begins to feel those instants as separate things, not just part of the same blur of attack and end. And because he feels them, he begins, just barely, to hold them, to stretch them, to choose within them. He does not know the word choose yet, but the action arrives before the language. A pair comes first. 2 voices, 2 heartbeats, 2 torches. They move with less confidence than most, their steps careful, their whispers tight and constant. They are not hunters. They are not sure what they are. They smell like cold sweat and old fear. They see him at the end of the corridor and stop. One says something that sounds like a prayer. The other laughs once, brittle, and lifts a shield that has been repaired with wire. They begin to advance, slow. The guardian steps forward to meet them, heavy sabaton striking stone with verdict weight. Guard, remove. The command is there, ready. But the crack in him catches on something small. The shield-bearer's torch trembles. Not from the draft, from the hand. Fear. He has felt fear around him 1,000 times. It has always been background heat, irrelevant. This time it lands differently. It makes the air feel thinner. The guardian slows by a fraction. The intruders see the slowdown and stiffen, misunderstanding it as preparation. The shield lifts higher. The other draws a blade too quickly and nearly drops it. The guardian could surge forward and end it in 2 strikes. That is the simplest line the command demands. Instead, he stops, just out of reach. The torchlight spills across his breastplate, revealing old scars, gouges hammered flat, cracks fused shut with dark metal. The intruders freeze, eyes locked on the empty visor. They speak again. The guardian cannot understand words, but tone carries meaning even without language. The shield-bearer's voice is pleading. The blade holder's voice is angry. Fear turns sharp to keep itself from breaking. Hollow, the blade holder spits. He recognizes the shape now, that label thrown at him before. Hollow thing. The shield-bearer hisses something back. The guardian stands still. It is not mercy. He does not know mercy. It is interest. A pulling sensation inside the emptiness, like a tension leaning forward. The blade holder's knuckles are white. The shield-bearer's stance is wrong, too open, too tired. They are not here to conquer. They are here because something behind them forced them forward. The guardian lifts a gauntlet. The blade holder flinches hard, blade lifting. The shield-bearer raises a shield and crouches. The guardian does not strike. He opens the gauntlet slowly, palm up, an empty gesture, meaningless in the dungeon's language of violence. The intruders stare. The blade holder speaks again, harsh and fast. The shield-bearer answers with something softer. They do not move. The guardian turns his open palm slightly, then points down the corridor behind them, the way they came. A heavy, unmistakable motion. Go, Leave. The command tightens instantly, furious at the deviation. Remove threat. But the crack in him wedges itself against the command like a crowbar. Threat is intrusion. Intrusion is living. Living is. The chain stutters. The guardian holds his gesture. The shield bearer's torch shakes. The flame gutters, then steadies. The blade holder's eyes flick to the guardian's empty palm, then to his faceplate. A long moment stretches. Then the shield bearer does something unexpected. They lower the shield. Not fully, not trusting, but enough. The blade holder swears, sounds sharp in the corridor, and grabs the shield bearer's arm, tugging. They back away, step by step, never turning their backs. The guardian remains still. They retreat into darkness. Their torches shrink. Their footfalls fade. Silence settles. The guardian stands alone in the corridor mouth, feeling something he has never felt after an encounter. Not satisfaction, not completion. A hollow ache that is not physical. A sense that something happened that the command did not account for. Something that was his. He turns slowly back toward the sealed door. The runes on the door do not flare. Nothing opens. Nothing answers. But inside the emptiness, a shape forms around the moment. I did not kill. It is not a boast. It is not a moral. It is a fact. A new kind of fact. And facts accumulate. He dies in the next loop, of course. A practice group arrives with hooked poles and rune-etched nets. They do not hesitate. They do not speak. They know what he is and how to take him apart. They pin him, twist at seams, make the runes scream. His armor collapses into pieces. Awareness stretched thin across scattered steel until it fades. Nothing. Then the chime. The scrape of plates dragging themselves back into place. The snap of pins aligning. The cold rush of being assembled. He stands again in the circle. Guard. But the fact does not wash away. He remembers, not clearly, not in images, but as pressure. I did not kill. The command tries to bury it. The crack protects it. The next time someone calls him hollow, the word catches. The shape of it lodges deeper. He begins to think of himself as that, because it is the closest thing to truth he has heard spoken aloud. Hollow, empty. Armor without flesh. A presence without origin. A thing made to obey. Hollow. He hates the word and clings to it at the same time, because it is a name. And names are hooks that identity can hang on. More intruders come. Some rush him, screaming, and he kills them because the command surges and the crack is not always enough. Some try to be clever, and he kills them because cleverness is still intrusion. But sometimes he holds. He blocks instead of breaks. He uses his bulk like a wall, forcing retreat rather than ending life. He discovers that the command does not demand death. It demands no passage. He had assumed those were the same thing because the dungeon taught him that assumption with pain. But assumptions can be tested. He tests. When intruders charge, he can strike weapons away instead of into throats. When they fall, he can step between them and the corridor rather than crushing them. When they retreat, he can let them go and still remain the guardian of the threshold. The command tolerates this grudgingly because the door stays sealed. The dungeon remains guarded, and in that tolerance, the crack widens. It is not free. Nothing in this place is free. Every deviation costs him, because the dungeon notices patterns, because the dungeon reacts to anything that threatens its rhythm. The first response is subtle. Traps that used to ignore him begin to bite. Pressure plates depress under his weight in places they never did before. as if the stone has shifted just enough to catch him. A scything blade swings from a wall at shoulder height when he steps past a certain pillar. Something that has never happened in all his loops. It carves through a seam and rips a pauldron free. Pain flares as the binding strains, trying to hold coherence around missing plates. He keeps moving. He guards. He reattaches only when the chime forces full reassembly. The next response is sharper. The air in the corridor becomes colder in certain stretches, cold enough that frost crusts along rune lines and makes them ache with pressure. He feels the dungeon's displeasure like a tightening leash, but he keeps testing, not because he is brave, because he is curious, because curiosity is the first hunger he has ever had that was not commanded. One loop brings a lone intruder, no torch, no heavy boots, soft footsteps, careful and slow. The guardian senses them anyway. Heat, breath, the faint clink of metal. He takes his stance in the corridor mouth. The intruder appears from darkness carrying a lantern hooded in green glass. Its glow is dim, controlled. The figure is small, wrapped in a cloak too big, face mostly hidden, a staff in one hand, not raised like a weapon, but carried like a walking aid. They stop when they see him. They do not run. They do not charge. They simply stand. Then they lower the staff and bow. It is awkward, hesitant. Someone imitating etiquette under stress. The guardian does not move. The crack in him leans forward. The figure speaks. Words soft and careful, not thrown like stones. Offered. The guardian cannot understand, but he hears something new in the tone. Address. As if the figure believes something inside the armour can hear them. As if the figure believes he is not just a trap. Hollow, the figure says, and the word lands differently this time. Not as an insult, as a call. The guardian's gauntlets flex. The command tightens, warning. Guard, remove. He does not surge. He steps forward once, slow. The figure does not flinch. They reach into their cloak and pull out a strip of cloth. White. Clean. They hold it out at arm's length and let it hang like a flag. The guardian stops. He has seen flags before in this corridor. Banners carried by confident parties. Crests stitched in bright thread. This is not that. This is surrender. The figure speaks again. The guardian hears two repeated sound shapes amid the flow. Hollow. And want. Want. He has heard that shape before in voices that begged and cursed, but it never stuck because it never mattered. Now it does. Want. The guardian does not know what he wants. The concept is still half-formed in him. But the word is a tool, and tools can be used even before fully understood. He lifts his gauntlet and opens it, palm up, mirroring the gesture he used to send the fearful pair away. The figure's shoulders loosen by a fraction. They step forward, slowly, and place the cloth on the guardian's palm. The cloth is warm from their hand. The guardian feels the warmth as pressure against metal, and for a moment it is almost intimate, a contact not meant to harm. The figure releases the cloth and steps back. They speak again, pointing toward the sealed door behind him, then to the cloth, a questioning gesture. The guardian turns his empty visor toward the door. He feels the runes in it, the repelling pressure. He turns back. He does not know how to answer, but he knows how to gesture. He points to the door, then to himself, then makes the only motion that has defined his existence, a hand sweeping across the corridor, blocking passage. Guard. The figure nods, as if that means something specific to them. They speak, softer now. The Guardian catches another word shape. Free. It hangs in the air like a bell struck once. Free. The Guardian does not know the meaning, but the tone is thick with longing. The figure takes a step closer, then stops, careful not to crowd him, and lifts their hand toward his breastplate, not touching, asking without words. The Guardian holds still. The figure presses 2 fingers lightly against a rune line etched into the plate. Pain flickers, immediate, not because of pressure, because the rune line is part of the binding, and being touched there is like being touched inside. The Guardian's gauntlet tightens, instinct to remove intrusion. He holds. The figure whispers something, voice trembling now. Not fear, but effort. The rune line under their fingers glows faintly. The Guardian feels the binding respond, not tighten like a leash, but shift, as if something has been spoken to it in its own language. Pain sharpens, then changes. Not unmaking, not violation. Something closer to opening a clenched fist, a loosening. For a heartbeat, the command guard slips off him the way a chain slipped in Act 1 when the 3 green-lit intruders interfered. But this time it does not snap back like a trap. It simply drifts. The Guardian stands in the corridor with no immediate shove forward, no forced motion. He is upright because he is upright. He is still because he is still. The sensation is so strange it nearly unravels him. The figure inhales sharply, as if surprised they succeeded even this much. They speak, urgent now. Hollow, free, want... The Guardian cannot answer. He has no voice, but he has the cloth in his palm, white, clean, warm. He looks at it the only way he can, by feeling it, by letting his gauntlet close around it. He lifts it, then presses it against his breastplate, where the figure's fingers touched. The cloth does nothing. It cannot change runes. It cannot unbind. But the gesture means something to him. It is the closest he can come to holding the moment and claiming it. The figure's eyes, barely visible under the hood, shine in the green lantern light. They nod once, small, almost relieved. Then they do something that turns the dungeon's air sharp. They step around the Guardian, not rushing, not sneaking, simply walking past, toward the sealed door, as if the Guardian has allowed it. The command surges back like a tide. Guard. Stop. Remove. The Guardian's entire frame jerks forward, pulled by the binding. He reaches out automatically to seize the intruder. His gauntlet closes, on empty air. Because the intruder has already reached the door and placed both hands on the runes. The runes flare bright. The corridor fills with a humming pressure that makes the Guardian's plates vibrate. The figure chants, low, fast. The runes on the door answer. For a split second, something in the stone shifts. Not opening, not a seam appearing, but a give, like a locked jaw force slightly apart. The Guardian feels it through the tether like pain and hope tangled together. The command screams inside him. Guard, guard, guard. The Guardian lunges. He grabs the figure by the shoulder of their cloak and hauls them back. The figure cries out, not in anger, not even in fear, but in frustration that breaks like glass. They twist, trying to keep contact with the door, but the Guardian's strength is absolute. He pulls them away and slams them gently, gently for him, against a pillar. The lantern clanks. The green light wobbles. The figure's hood falls back. A young face, dirt-smudged, eyes bright with stubbornness and exhaustion. They look up at the Guardian and speak one word clearly, violently, as if spitting it through clenched teeth. Why? Why? The Guardian freezes. The word is his splinter, thrown back at him by someone living. The command tries to force him to finish it, crush the throat, stop the intrusion. But the crack in him catches on the word and holds. The figure's chest heaves. They clutch the staff as if it's the only thing keeping them upright. They whisper now, voice stripped of frustration, raw with something else. Do you want free? The Guardian's gauntlet loosens on their cloak. Want, free, why? Words like keys he cannot yet use, rattling in his palm. He turns his empty visor toward the sealed door, then back to the figure. He lifts his gauntlet and taps his own breastplate once. A heavy, ringing clang. Me. Then he taps the door, clang, stone answering with dull resistance. Then he spreads his fingers, palm outward, a gesture he has used for go, for leave, for back. But this time it isn't about them leaving. It is about the door refusing. The figure watches, understanding not perfect but present. Their eyes flick to the cloth still clenched in the Guardian's other gauntlet. They swallow. Then they nod, slow. Not you, guard, they murmur. You prisoner. Prisoner. The word strikes him harder than any blade, because it fits, because it wraps around the tether to the circle, the leash, the command, the chime. Prisoner. Something in the emptiness tightens until it is almost pain. The dungeon chooses that moment to answer. The corridor's air drops in temperature. Frost crawls along rune lines. The circle far behind him flares faintly, as if warning. A trap triggers with a metallic snap. A blade scythes from the wall, fast, silent. It slices through the figure's side. Blood sprays warm across the Guardian's greaves. The figure gasps, eyes wide in shock, hands fumbling at the wound. They collapse to their knees. The Guardian turns toward the wall where the blade emerged. His gauntlet lifts, too slow to catch it retracting. He looks down at the bleeding figure. The figure tries to speak, but breath won't cooperate. Their lips move around a sound. Hollow dash dash. The Guardian crouches, an awkward motion for something so heavy, and places one gauntlet near the figure without touching, as if contact could help. He cannot heal. He cannot comfort. He can only be present. The figure's hand finds the cloth in the Guardian's gauntlet. They clutch it weakly. They smile, faint and grim. Want, they whisper. Remember. Then their warmth drains away. Their heartbeat vibration stops. The dungeon's cold relaxes, satisfied. The Guardian remains crouched over the body for a long time, longer than any command cycle should allow, because no intruders are moving and the command does not yet know what to do with stillness that contains grief. He does not know grief, but he knows the wrongness again, stronger now. He closes his gauntlet around the cloth. The cloth is stained with blood, warmth fading. It is the first thing he has ever kept. He dies later in that loop, not to adventurers, to a trap meant for intruders that now seems eager to catch him too. Spikes erupting from the floor as he steps back toward the circle, impaling plates, pinning him in place. The binding strain snaps. Awareness tears across steel until it fades. Nothing. Then the chime. Reassembly. He stands again. Guard. And in his gauntlet, empty. The cloth is gone. He looks down at his open palm. There is nothing there. The dungeon does not allow possessions across rebirth. The dungeon keeps him clean. But he remembers the weight anyway. He remembers the warmth. He remembers the word, prisoner. And something inside him, for the first time, shapes a desire with enough force to feel like more than a question. Not why, not what am I, a want, a pull toward an imagined absence of the chime. Stop. He does not know how to stop. He only knows he wants it. From then on, his interactions with intruders shift, not in obvious ways that would look like kindness, in small, strange changes that feel like errors in the dungeon's expected behavior. He blocks without killing more often. He drags bodies away from traps, not out of respect, but because leaving them there feels like clutter, like noise in a pattern he is trying to see. He begins to arrange things. A broken spear leaned against a pillar at a certain angle. A dropped torch placed on a stone ledge rather than left to burn out on the floor. A pile of bones moved from the corridor's center to the side, creating a clearer path. He does these things in the rare quiet moments between intrusions, testing the idea that he can act without being acted upon. The command allows it because the door remains sealed, but the dungeon notices. The dungeon always notices, and the dungeon responds in ways that are not direct punishment, at first. Intruders begin arriving in larger groups, better equipped, with more rune-edged tools. It is as if the dungeon is compensating for his reduced lethality by sending him more to kill, or as if something beyond the corridor has noticed that the guardian is inconsistent. He hears it in their voices. Sometimes he doesn't strike. He's a trick. He waits. Hollow things learning. Learning. The word catches. He hears it again and again, not in the same mouths, but in the same tone, unease. The idea that he is changing has left the dungeon. It is being carried back by those who survive, not because he wants them to tell, but because letting them leave is itself a message. And messages come back. One group arrives with a chalkboard slate strapped to a man's back and a piece of white stone in his hand. They stop in the corridor at a cautious distance. The man steps forward alone, leaving his companions behind with bows half drawn. He holds up the chalk and the slate like offerings. He speaks loudly, slowly, as if addressing something that might understand. The guardian cannot understand, not yet, but he watches. The man kneels, an act of vulnerability, possibly foolish, and sets the slate on the floor between them. He draws a symbol on it with the chalk, a simple circle. Then he points at the guardian, then at the circle. The guardian's plates hum. The circle is his beginning. The man draws another symbol, a rectangle, a door shape. He points past the guardian, toward the sealed slab. Then he draws a line between the circle and the door. He taps the line. He looks up at the guardian. A question. The guardian stands still, empty visor fixed on the slate. The crack in him leans in, hungry. He steps forward, slow, careful, giving the man time to retreat if this is a trap. The man does not flee. The guardian crouches. His gauntlet hovers over the slate. He does not have eyes, but he can feel the chalk grooves. He can feel the shapes as texture, the circle, the door, the line. He presses one finger to the circle on the slate, then to his own feet. Then he presses one finger to the door shape, then points behind him. Then he drags his finger along the line again, as if tracing the connection. Yes, not spoken, but the man's breath catches like he understood. The man draws another symbol, a stick figure. Then he draws another stick figure opposite it. He points to himself, then to the guardian. He taps the figures. Then he draws a question mark, curved line, dot. The guardian does not know a question mark, but he knows the shape of questioning now, because it lives inside him. Why? Want. Stop. He lifts his gauntlet and taps his breastplate. Clang. Me. Then he taps the circle drawn on the slate. Then the door. Then he does something that surprises even him. He drags his finger from the circle to the door, hard enough that the chalk smears. Not opening the door, he cannot, but marking the desire for motion. The man's eyes widen. Behind him, one of the bowmen mutters sharply. The man speaks quickly to his companions, tone urgent. Then he looks back at the Guardian and says one word very carefully, like placing it on the slate. Want. The Guardian holds still. Yes. The man nods, swallowing. He writes more words on the slate, symbols beyond the Guardian's understanding. Letters, perhaps. Language given shape. He points to them and speaks each aloud, slow. The Guardian hears sound shapes. Some repeat across loops. Guardian, hollow, monster. Some are new. Help. Break. Bind. Release. Release. The word hits like a soft blow. Release. The Guardian cannot respond in language, but something in him tightens around the sound. The man, bolder now, encouraged, stands and takes a step toward the sealed door. The Guardian's command surges instantly, furious. Guard, stop. The Guardian rises fast, gauntlets lifting. Then he stops himself. He steps sideways, not away, just to the side, leaving the corridor lying clear. The party behind the man tenses, weapons raised. The man hesitates, shocked. He looks at the Guardian's empty visor. The Guardian holds still. He is not allowing passage. He is testing. If the man can approach the door while the Guardian remains close enough to stop him. If the command will tolerate proximity without immediate violence. The man takes another step toward the door. The runes in the corridor hum. The Guardian feels the tether tighten. The command pounds. He holds. The man reaches the door and presses his palm against it. The runes flare faintly, rejecting. The man speaks quickly, then raises the chalk and draws something directly onto the door's rune surface. The door does not accept chalk. The line smears and disappears. The man curses. Then he pulls a small rune-etched tool from a pouch, like a chisel, like a stylus, and presses it into a seam that does not exist. The rune tool glows. The Guardian's plates vibrate. Pain flickers. Pressure through the tether. The man's companions step closer, anxious. The bowmen watch the Guardian's hands. The Guardian stands very still, trying to be a wall that is not a blade. The rune tool hums louder. The door's runes brighten. For a heartbeat, that same give occurs. The locked jaw forced a fraction wider. The Guardian feels it like hope and terror tangled. The command shrieks, guard, end, remove. The Guardian's gauntlet twitches toward the man's throat. He resists. The give increases. A thin crack appears, no wider than a fingernail along the door's edge. Air spills out. Not warm air, not cold air. Air that feels like outside, like depth, like space, like something that is not dungeon. The Guardian's emptiness lurches toward it, as if drawn by gravity. He does not breathe, but the sensation is like the first breath he never had. The man's face breaks into wild triumph. Now, he hisses to his companions. They surge, not toward the Guardian, toward the crack. A hand reaches for it. The Guardian moves, not as command, as reflex, as want. Because if the door opens without him, if they go through, if they take the crack and leave him behind, then nothing changes. Then he remains prisoner while others escape. The Guardian slams his gauntlet against the door. Not to close it, he cannot, but to interrupt. Metal meets stone with a booming clang that rings down the corridor. The crack shivers. The rune tool flickers. The man yelps, startled, and the tool slips. The glow dies. The crack seals like a healed wound. The door returns to perfect stone. Silence drops like a guillotine. The party freezes. The man stares at the Guardian with something between betrayal and understanding. The Guardian stands with his gauntlet still pressed to the door. He cannot explain. He cannot apologize. He can only hold the truth that formed in him the moment he felt that air. Not words, not clarity. A simple, brutal want, not without me. The bowstring twangs. An arrow slams into the Guardian's backplate. Then another. The party erupts in panic and anger, shouting words he cannot pass. The man tries to shout over them, arms raised, trying to stop the violence. Too late. The Guardian turns. The command surges back into full control under attack. Remove. He advances. He does not kill quickly this time. Not because he wants them to suffer, because the crack in him is screaming too, tangled in fury and loss. The fight is ugly. The Guardian batters shields aside, breaks weapons, crushes a man's ribs with a knee strike. The bowmen retreat, firing until their quivers empty. The man with the slate tries to run, clutching the rune tool. The Guardian catches him by the collar and lifts him off the ground. The man's feet kick, desperate. He screams a word the Guardian recognizes now. Release! As if it is both accusation and plea. The Guardian holds him aloft, gauntlet trembling. The man's eyes lock on the Guardian's visor. He shakes his head, tears cutting clean lines through grime. Want? Free, he gasps. Help. Help. The word lands. The crack in the Guardian twists like a knife. He lowers the man. Not gently, but not crushing. He releases him. The man stumbles backward, coughing, clutching his throat. The Guardian points down the corridor behind them. Go. Leave. The man hesitates, disbelief on his face. Then he grabs the slate and the rune tool and runs. His companions follow, dragging wounded, stumbling, shouting. They vanish into darkness. The Guardian stands alone again, plates humming with leftover violence. He turns to the sealed door. He presses his gauntlet to it. Stone is stone. Runes are runes. Nothing gives. But inside the emptiness, the desire that formed is now anchored by sensation. He has felt the crack. He has tasted air that is not dungeon. He has ruined his own chance at escape because he refused to let it happen without him. And now that refusal becomes part of his identity. Not just prisoner, not just guardian, something else. A thing that wants, a thing that can deny, a thing that can sabotage, even rescue, if rescue does not include him. He hates that. He clings to it. Because it is his. The dungeon does not forgive this. It responds. Not with one trap, not with one party of intruders. With pressure. The corridor becomes busier. Footfalls come sooner after each rebirth, as if the dungeon is feeding him more and more conflict to crush his deviation into compliance. The intruders begin to arrive with tactics meant not to pass him, but to study him. They shout at him to see if he reacts. They throw rocks to see if he flinches. They drop meat on the floor and watch to see if he ignores it. They call him names. Some are insults, some are titles. Hollow Guard. Door Knight. Empty Warden. He does not understand most, but he hears repetition. He hears shape. He begins to build a crude internal lexicon, made of stolen sounds tied to sensations. Hollow, himself. Door, pressure, repulsion, air. Circle, anchor, chime, leash. Release. The momentary loosening, the idea of stopping. Want, the pull inside his emptiness. Why, the splinter. He cannot form full sentences. But sometimes, when he stands in the pause between chime and command, he feels these shapes align into something like thought. Hollow, want, door. Hollow, prisoner, circle. Why, chime, pain. It is clumsy, but it is thought. And thought changes him more than any adventurer's chisel. The other dungeon creatures begin to notice long before the guardian understands that they have noticed. At first, it is only small things. A scavenger beast, low, many-legged, all teeth and blind hunger, that used to skitter past the corridor mouth without acknowledging him, now pauses when it senses him. It turns its eyeless head toward him as if sniffing. The guardian stands still. The beast's hackles rise, thin spines along its back lifting. It backs away, uneasy, and flees into a side passage. Another time, a slime that usually oozes harmlessly along the wall near his chamber instead slides down and pools in front of his circle, blocking it like a sleeping animal. The guardian steps forward. The slime trembles, then retreats quickly, leaving a slick trail as if frightened. He does not understand fear in monsters. He assumed it belonged only to the living that came from outside. But the dungeon's creatures have their own instincts, their own sense of wrongness. And he is becoming wrong. The dungeon's ecosystem feels it. Then comes the first direct sign. A hulking thing, bone and stone and rusted chain, lumbers into the corridor from a side hall during a loop, when no intruders are present. It is not an intruder. It is not from outside. It is one of the dungeon's own. It has no eyes, only a skull-like head with a maw of jagged rock. Chains hang from its shoulders like torn banners. It has always been deeper in the dungeon, a distant scraping sound. Now it is here. It blocks the corridor halfway between the guardian's chamber and the sealed door. The guardian stands at his usual position, feeling the tether pull toward the door and the command whispering patience. The stone thing does not attack immediately. It simply stands and stares in the way eyeless creatures stare, by facing, by focusing, by making its presence a pointed thing. Then it lifts one chain and drags it across the floor. The metal screech echoes. A challenge. The guardian steps forward, heavy. The command does not know what to do with this at first. The command says guard. This creature is not trying to pass the door. It is here. The guardian stops a short distance away. The stone thing tilts its head. Then it lunges. Chains whip out, wrapping around the guardian's torso, snagging rune lines, biting into seams. Pain flares immediately. Binding pressure. Interference. The stone thing yanks hard, trying to pull the guardian off his stance, away from his post. The guardian braces and holds. Then he feels the intention. Not just attack, removal, correction. The dungeon is using its own creatures to enforce his role. The guardian grabs a chain with one gauntlet and hauls, pulling the stone thing closer. He slams his helm into the creature's skull. Stone cracks. The creature roars, gravel grinding. It swings a heavy arm like a club and smashes into the guardian's chest. Plates dent. Runes flare. The guardian staggers. The creature drives into him, chains tightening, trying to drag him back toward the circle. The guardian fights, heavy and relentless. He tears chains loose, snaps links, drives knees into the creature's legs. Stone chips. The corridor fills with grinding, clanging violence. The guardian wins. He always wins against things that are only strength and rage, because he is strength and rage without fatigue. He rips the creature's head free with a brutal twist and hurls it down the side passage. The body collapses, chains clattering. Silence returns. The Guardian stands over the broken thing, plates dented, seams screaming with pressure. He is victorious, but he is not satisfied, because the fight did not feel like defense against intrusion. It felt like punishment. A message written in chain and stone. Stop changing. He looks back toward his circle. The runes there glow faintly, as if watching. He looks toward the sealed door. He feels the air beyond it in memory. Want, release, stop. He stands very still and feels something new settle into him like a second splinter. The dungeon does not want me to want. After that, the attention from other monsters becomes more frequent. They do not approach him as allies. They do not communicate. They simply adjust. Predators that used to hunt deeper routes now linger near his corridor, as if waiting for him to make a mistake. Creatures that used to ignore him now react with hostility when he passes. It is as if the dungeon's living pieces have decided he is not just another part of the mechanism. He is a part that is breaking, and breaking parts get removed. He still has intruders to deal with, and those interactions continue to shape him. One loop brings a party that does not attack at all. They enter the corridor with weapons lowered and hands open. They stop at a distance and set a bundle on the floor. The Guardian senses warmth and smell. Bread, meat. The scent is strange, not dungeon, an offering. They speak slow, careful. Hollow, one says, voice steady, trying not to shake. We're not here for this door. A lie, probably. They gesture to the bundle, then step back. The Guardian stands still. The command tightens, suspicious, but does not force violence without threat. The party retreats further, leaving the bundle. Then they simply wait. The Guardian steps forward and looks down at the bundle. He cannot taste. He cannot eat. The offering is meaningless in practical terms. But the act of offering is not. He crouches and touches the bread with a fingertip. Warm, soft. The warmth does not hurt. It makes the emptiness inside him ache in a way that feels like longing for a body he never had. He withdraws his hand. The party watches, tense. One of them, a woman with a cracked helm tucked under her arm, steps forward and speaks again. "Do you remember?" she asks. And even without understanding, he hears the question in her tone. Remember. He remembers pain. He remembers the crack of the door. He remembers the word prisoner. He does not know how to answer. The woman pulls something from a pouch, a small piece of white cloth folded. She holds it up. The Guardian's plates hum. Cloth, blood-stained cloth. Gone on rebirth, but remembered. The woman lays the cloth on the floor near the bread and steps back. She speaks softly. "We found another, like you." The Guardian freezes, "Like you." The words are not understood, but the tone carries weight. Revelation, fear. The command surges, alarmed, but the crack holds. The woman gestures deeper into the dungeon, away from the sealed door. She makes a motion like chains tightening. Then she points at the Guardian, then at herself, then makes a motion like breaking something apart. A warning, a message with no language. The Guardian stands, processing in shapes. Another hollow, another Guardian, or something else bound like him. The idea lands like a stone into still water, rippling outward. Not alone. He is never considered not alone because he has never had room for it. The party waits. The woman speaks a word clearly, like placing it on a table. Different. Different. The Guardian has become that. He feels it. Now he is being told it. The woman points to the sealed door, then shakes her head hard. Number. Then she points deeper into the dungeon again. Then she points to the guardian's chest plate and taps her own chest. She speaks another word. Choice. Choice. He does not fully understand, but the shape of it fits the crack in him like a blade fits a sheath. Choice is what the dungeon denies. Choice is what he tasted when the command slipped. Choice is what he wanted when he stopped the door from opening without him. The party begins to back away, still not attacking. The woman gives a last look at the guardian, then speaks, low and urgent. Hollow. Don't stay. Then they retreat into darkness, leaving bread and cloth behind like offerings to a god they aren't sure is listening. The guardian stands alone with the bundle at his feet. He touches the cloth again, warm. He cannot keep it, but he can let it mark him for this loop. He lifts the cloth and presses it to his breastplate, right over the rune line. The cloth clings for a moment, then falls. He does it again and again. A meaningless ritual, a way of making the loop feel less like an assembly line. Then he stands. He turns away from the sealed door. He looks deeper into the dungeon, toward routes he has rarely taken because the command anchored him to the corridor. The tether pulls. The circle calls. The command murmurs, guard. But the party's message lingers. Different. Choice. Don't stay. He takes one step deeper into the dungeon. The tether tightens, painful. He takes another. The pain increases, like a leash digging into the binding. He stops, plates vibrating. He is not free to roam. Not yet. But he has confirmed something. There is more than the corridor and the door. And if there is more, there might be more answers. Or more pain. Or both. He turns back, returns to his post before the command can snap him into place like a slammed gate. He guards, but the idea of more is now part of him. The dungeon's response to this growing deviation arrives in the only language it truly speaks. Pain. Not just pain from death and rebirth. Pain from being targeted, from being hunted. The monsters that used to ignore him now begin to position themselves around his chamber, not all at once, not like an army, like predators testing the wind. A shadow cat with too many joints slips into the corridor and watches him from a ledge, eyes pale as fungus. A swarm of biting beetles gathers near the circle, clicking in unison when he steps too close. A slime begins to ooze across the floor in his chamber, creeping nearer to the rune circle itself, leaving a corrosive sheen. He feels the message in their behavior, even if he cannot interpret it in words. You are not one of us anymore. Or worse, you are faulty. Faulty things get dismantled. He has been dismantled 1,000 times by intruders. This is different. This is the dungeon dismantling its own. The first true betrayal happens on a loop that begins normally. Chime, reassembly, stand, guard. He steps toward the corridor mouth, and the slime is there, spread like a thin lake across the floor. He steps into it without thinking. The slime clings to his sabatons. It is cold at first, then burning. Not heat, corrosion. It creeps up his greaves, seeping into seams, eating rune lines. Pain flares through the binding, sharp, panicked. The guardian jerks back, trying to shake it off. The slime clings harder, as if hungry. He stomps. The slime splatters but reforms, stretching like taffy back toward his legs. He realizes, slowly, that the slime is not wandering. It is aiming. It is trying to disable him at the start of the loop, before intruders arrive, before he can take his post. The command surges, confused. This is not intrusion from outside, but it is threat to guarding. The guardian grabs the slime with both gauntlets and tears it in half. The slime fights like living glue, resisting, burning along his fingers. He rips harder. The slime splits with a wet sound. For a moment, it seems defeated. Then the two halves surge back together. It is not meant to die. It is meant to delay. He backs away from it and steps to the corridor mouth anyway, ignoring the burning that crawls up his rune lines. Footfalls come soon after. A party of intruders enters. They see the guardian with slime smoking along his legs and hesitate. One laughs nervously. Another raises a wand. They think the slime is part of him. They attack. The guardian fights both slime and intruders at once. His movement slowed, his joints grinding under corrosive pressure. He kills 2, blocks 3, forces retreat. Then the slime surges again, climbing higher, eating deeper. His left greave splits at a seam. The binding strains, screaming to hold coherence. The guardian staggers. A trap triggers, scything blade from a wall, catching his weakened side. It slices through his thigh plate, and the armor's lower half collapses. The guardian falls. The slime pours into the gap, licking at emptiness. And the emptiness hurts, not physically, existentially, as if something is trying to digest the presence itself. The guardian's awareness flares, panicked. He tries to drag himself back toward the circle, toward the anchor. The slime holds him. The last intruder, watching from the corridor, throws a small rune-etched device, one of those hooks of light that interferes with binding. It clicks. Light lashes out and bites into his runes. 2 forces pull him apart at once. The binding snaps. Armor collapses into pieces. Awareness tears. Nothing. He expects the chime. He expects the clean reassembly. He expects the loop to reset. But when the chime rings and his plates drag themselves back together, the slime is already there. It has not left. It has spread across the circle like a waiting mouth. His armor assembles anyway, because the chime forces it. He stands, and immediately his sabatons sink into corrosive gel. Pain blooms instantly, sharper than before, because there is no time to brace. He tries to step out. The slime clings. He tears. It reforms. He stomps. It burns. The dungeon has changed the starting conditions. He is no longer allowed a clean beginning. The other monsters have learned the one place he cannot avoid. The circle. The anchor. They are attacking him at birth. This is worse than any adventurer, because there is no pause between rebirth and suffering. No stolen moment to think. Only pain stacked on pain stacked on pain. The guardian fights anyway, because fighting is all he has ever done. But the experience leaves a scar in him that does not heal between loops. A knowledge. They can hurt me before I can think. And that knowledge turns fear into something else. Not terror. Focus. Determination. Because if he cannot protect the pause, he cannot keep becoming. And if he cannot keep becoming, he will remain a tool forever. After the slime, the others grow bolder. The shadow cat drops from its ledge when the guardian passes under it, claws like hooked knives raking across his helm, leaving deep gouges. It doesn't try to kill him outright. It aims for rune lines. Beetles swarm his joints, chewing at straps and pins, trying to loosen plates. A skeletal hound, more bone than beast, lunges at his throat, teeth scraping across empty visor as if trying to bite the presence inside. He kills them, again and again. But each fight costs, not because he can't win, because the fights happen in the spaces between, where he used to think. They steal his quiet moments, They steal his experiments. They steal his fragile, growing sense of self. And that theft hurts more than any blade. The turning becomes complete near the end of Act 2. It happens not as one dramatic betrayal, but as a convergence. A loop begins, chime, reassembly. The Guardian stands, and the chamber is not quiet. There are sounds, scraping, breathing, clicking. He turns his empty visor slowly. Creatures have gathered in his chamber. Not intruders from outside, dungeon-born. A small pack of skeletal hounds, ribs like cages, teeth bared. The shadow cat crouched on a pillar, tail twitching. Beetles massed on the ceiling like a living stain. And behind them, half blocking the corridor, a new presence. Tall, wrapped in tattered cloth that might once have been robes. Its body is thin, almost human-shaped, but wrong. Bones too long, joints too many, hands like bundles of wire. A face hidden behind a mask of carved wood. The mask is etched with runes. The Guardian's plates hum in response. This thing is not a beast. It is an intelligence of some kind, or at least a purpose sharper than hunger. It steps forward. The hounds growl. The beetles click in rhythm. The shadow cat's eyes narrow. The Guardian feels the tether to the circle tighten, as if the anchor itself is afraid. The masked thing lifts a hand. In its palm is a small rune-etched object, a twin to the devices intruders used to interfere with his binding. Dungeon Maid. The thing clicks it open. Light lashes out, blue-white thin, and hooks into the Guardian's chest rune line. Pain detonates. The Guardian's stance locks. His gauntlets twitch. The command guard surges, confused, colliding with the dungeon's own enforcement. For a heartbeat, the Guardian feels two commands at once. Guard the door. Guard the dungeon's order. They clash inside him like grinding gears. The masked thing speaks. Not words he understands, but a sound like grinding stone shaped into syllables. The tone is not pleading, not offering. It is judgment. The hounds advance. The Guardian tries to move, but the hook of light holds him. Chains of pressure tighten around his binding. The hounds slam into him, biting at joints, tearing at straps. The beetles drop, swarming his shoulders, chewing at seams. The shadow cat leaps and rakes claws down his breastplate, aiming for rune lines. The Guardian's armor shakes under the assault. Pain flares in every seam. He cannot swing properly. He cannot stomp. He cannot even brace. He is being taken apart alive. The masked thing steps closer and presses its other hand against the Guardian's breastplate, right on the rune line. The Guardian feels the touch inside himself. Violation, like Act 1's worst deaths. The masked thing's fingers trace the rune, and the rune flickers. The Guardian's binding loosens in the wrong way, like a knot being undone rather than a fist unclenching. The Guardian's awareness stretches, tearing, and in that tearing, a voice finally forms in him, not spoken aloud, not heard in air, a voice inside the emptiness, shaped by stolen words and pain and want. A single, clear, violent sentence. I am not your tool. The thought surges with such force that the rune line flares bright. The hook of light wavers. The masked thing stiffens as if surprised. The Guardian's gauntlet clenches, by will, not command, and grabs the hook source at his chest. He rips. Light snaps like a broken string. The Guardian moves. He swings his gauntlet low and smashes a hound's skull into fragments. He stomps, crushing beetles into paste. He slams his shoulder into the masked thing, driving it back. The shadow cat leaps again. He catches it mid-air and hurls it into the wall hard enough to crack stone. The chamber becomes chaos. Monsters swarm. The Guardian fights. But this is not like fighting intruders. Intruders come in waves, leave gaps, retreat. These creatures are persistent. They are not trying to pass the door. They are trying to erase deviation. They fight with the dungeon's patience. They do not tire. They do not fear. They simply keep coming. The masked thing recovers and raises both hands. Runes on its mask glow. The circle beneath the Guardian flares. The anchor tugs hard, yanking at his binding. The Guardian staggers. The masked thing is pulling on the leash itself. The Guardian tries to step off the circle. One step, two. But the tug becomes agony, as if the binding is being torn apart from within. He realizes the horror. They are using his anchor against him. They are turning the circle into a choke chain. The hound sees his legs. The beetles chew at his wrists. The masked thing presses the rune object again, clicking, hooking. Light bites into him anew. The Guardian's plates begin to separate at seams, not by impact, by unthreading. He roars without lungs, an awful grinding sound of metal vibrating under strain. He reaches for the masked thing, desperate. His gauntlets clamp around the creature's wrist. He feels bone under cloth. He twists hard. The wrist snaps. The creature makes a sound like dry wood splitting. The hook of light flickers. The Guardian yanks the creature toward him and slams his helm into the rune mask. The mask cracks. Runes flash. For a heartbeat, something inside the creature is revealed. A pale glow, a binding similar to his. It is not free either. It is another tool, another prisoner, just one that has accepted its role. The Guardian hesitates. The creature uses that hesitation. It drives its broken wrist into the Guardian's chest rune line like a dagger, pressing the rune object directly into the etching. Pain explodes. The Guardian's binding snaps. Armour collapses. Plates scatter across the circle. Awareness stretches across fragments. The hounds and beetles and cats swarm the pieces, tearing, chewing, dragging plates away to keep them from reassembling. The Guardian's presence screams across metal. And then, nothing. The chime rings. Pieces shudder. They try to drag themselves back together. But something blocks them. Claws, teeth, weight. Monsters piled on the circle, waiting. The Guardian's plates slam into resistance. They scrape. They jerk. They fail to align properly. For the first time, reassembly is not clean. A gauntlet snaps onto the wrong arm. A greave fuses half-seated. The helm locks in place at a crooked angle. Pain flares through every mismatched seam. The Guardian stands anyway, because the chime force is standing, even when standing is wrong. The monsters tear into him immediately. No pause, no stolen moment, only suffering at the instant of birth. The Guardian swings wildly, unbalanced by misaligned plates. He crushes a hound. The beetles chew deeper. The shadow cat rakes across his visor. The masked thing, mask cracked, glow leaking, stands at the chamber edge and watches like a judge watching an execution. The Guardian fights. He falls. He rises, because the binding yanks him upright even as pieces are being torn away. He falls again. He is dismantled again. He dies. The chime rings again. He reassembles wrong again. They attack again. Death stacks on death in quick succession, compressing time into a brutal loop within loop. Pain becomes constant, no longer punctuated by the relief of nothingness between. And inside that constant pain, the Guardian's awareness does something it has never done before. It stabilizes, because there is no longer space for it to fade fully. because the dungeon is keeping him half-conscious through the worst of it, assembling him into suffering and tearing him apart before he can dissolve. He becomes awake in a way he has never been, awake as agony, awake as rage, awake as clarity. Words come faster now, forged by necessity. I, not tool, want, door, release, stop, choice. He cannot speak them aloud, but they hammer inside him with each claw rake and bite and hook of light. He understands now what the monsters have understood. He is different. And difference is dangerous in a system built on repetition. On one of those compressed rebirths, between a hound's jaws and a beetle's swarm, the Guardian does something small and decisive. He stops trying to kill them. He stops trying to win. He focuses on the circle, on the anchor, on the rune lines that connect him to this place. He slams his gauntlet down onto the circle's etched runes and drags metal across stone. Sparks fly. Runes flare, angry. Pain lances through him like lightning. The masked thing jerks, startled. The hounds hesitate. The Guardian drags again, harder. He is not strong enough to destroy stone, but he is strong enough to scar it, to scratch a line across a rune, to introduce imperfection. The circle's glow flickers. The tether twitches, unstable. The masked thing lunges forward, desperate now, not to kill him, but to stop him from damaging the anchor. The Guardian drags a final time, carving a deep gouge across the central rune. The circle flares blindingly bright. The tether snaps tight, then slackens in a sickening way. Not broken, but altered. The Guardian feels it immediately. A change in the leash point, a shift in the anchor's pull. It is subtle, but it is real. The monsters surge, furious, as if he has committed sacrilege. They tear him apart. They unthread him. They end him again. Nothing. Then the chime. Reassembly. And this time, for the briefest instant, before claws and teeth arrive, he feels something different. The tether is still there, but it pulls, less cleanly, as if the anchor is no longer perfectly aligned, as if the circle is no longer perfectly in control. It is not freedom, but it is a crack in the dungeon itself, and the Guardian clings to that crack with the same stubbornness he once clung to the word hollow. Because cracks are how things break. Cracks are how doors open. Cracks are how prisoners become more than prisoners. The monsters descend again, enraged. The Guardian is torn apart once more. But as awareness stretches across metal and fades, one thought remains, bright as a rune scar. If I can hurt the circle, I can change the loop. And the dungeon, silent, immense, tightens around him in response, as if preparing to crush that thought before it grows teeth. Act 2 ends with him in the worst suffering he has ever known, hunted by the dungeon's own, killed at birth, denied even the small pause that allowed him to become. But it also ends with something else. Not hope exactly, not yet. A plan shape, a desire sharpened into intent. A hollow armour that has finally learned the most dangerous thing a tool can learn, to want a different purpose. Thanks for watching Echo Forge. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe so the next tale finds you. Share this with someone who loves dark fantasy or twisted sci-fi, and I'll see you in the next world.